Welcome into a special Hog Hoops report, and Kevin may be special for the wrong reasons. We're still going to talk to all of you on Sunday, but we figured Kevin and I we got to get together and chat about whatever the heck that was in San Francisco yesterday. Arkansas in the Sweet 16 against Texas Tech, a chance to punch their ticket to the Elite Eight, and the Hogs fall 85-83 in overtime. Kevin, it was the same sorts of issues we've seen all season long. Arkansas had a 16-point lead, ends up blowing the second largest lead in Sweet 16 history. Just your impressions. 85-83, every opportunity for the Hogs to make it to the Elite Eight, and it all goes south in San Francisco.
I said all year long, if this team had an identity, that it plays two opponents every game.
Yeah.
The one wearing a different jersey and the one that themselves. And we've seen all year long Arkansas build double-digit second-half leads. They led by 16 with about 9.5 minutes to go.
Mhm.
They were still up 13 with less than 4.5 minutes to play. And in conjunction with playing two opponents, I think the other identity is I've got a real case, a real beef to say this team hates a double-digit
Mm.
lead, absolutely despises it. And it's one thing to play to your strengths and the other team just to be better, even if they weren't better for most of the game and they just found a way to beat you in the end. But to completely go against the book on what you do best, on what you should be doing with game, clock, lead, situation, and Arkansas does the opposite of
Mhm.
what you should be doing, those are choices that completely solidify the idea that, hey, you don't know how to close out games. You're your own worst enemy. You have these self-inflicted wound, long implosion stretches that do you. And now look, Arkansas dealt with injuries this year. It had a bad start in SEC play. And to get to a Sweet 16, there are a lot of accomplishments here that are good. But I think there's a sting when you lose that way in a game you should have won. And there were so many things that were ironic about this game. Texas Tech comes in with the fifth best rated offense in the country, making 10 threes per game at 37% efficiency. Arkansas is nowhere in that league. Yet Arkansas goes 10 of
Mhm.
25 from three for 40%, outshoots Texas Tech everywhere, but doesn't win a single statistical category when you look at the hustle plays. So Arkansas's offense was better in theory, except at the end, you have to understand game situation. You're up 13. You do not shoot threes early in
Mm-mm.
shot clock,
No.
protecting a double-digit lead with 3 minutes to go. In the final 3:11, Arkansas was 1 of 5 from three. They took threes on nearly every possession down the stretch, protecting a lead and early in the clock. I mean, it was bad enough what we've seen this team on the offensive glass all year, or not closing out defensive possessions with defensive rebounds and what other teams have done on the offensive glass. That was part of this. But the biggest part, I thought Arkansas could survive that. It was just what they did on offense. At the end of a game, you don't need early shot clock threes, no matter how good your percentage is getting to that point. It's game situation now. You're milking clock and you're looking to get to the basket because two things happen that are good there. Either you get an easy score or a closer range score, a higher percentage shot, or you get fouled and you go to the free throw line. And now the opponent's still trying to make up distance. But what you just gift wrap this game, in my opinion, you had a couple of bad turnovers in that stretch as
Mhm.
well, but a 14-3 run for Texas Tech to close it out. It was all gift wrapped. Jonas Adu with the missed front end of 1-1. Arkansas was 19 of 22 at the foul line, over 86%, but it's when you miss.
Yeah.
So Arkansas did everything it could to help this team. And I sound a little raw about it. Again, John Calipari, 58 tournament wins. He's the leader in all among active coaches. He's the first one of only two coaches joining Lon Kruger to take four different programs to a Sweet 16. Arkansas preseason 16 ranked in AP, and you made the Sweet 16, so you fixed all those problems. But when we look at this 22-14 overall record, how many losses were by virtue of Arkansas just helping the other team out in the end? The most recent time prior to this that we saw it was in the SEC tournament. You're up three at the very end, and you do everything wrong to fuel a 6-0 Ole Miss run, and you lose that game. But your season wasn't dead at that point. Well, this one ends. Arkansas's 15th Sweet 16 appearance in school history. Calipari's got a bunch of them. And so the season, I think, is a success in his first year. But to lose that way, that's going to hurt for a while. That was an ugly, ugly way to finish what should have been a win. Arkansas led for nearly 39 minutes in that one, out of 45 when you count the overtime minutes.
I think it's a good way that you put it there. You know, when you zoom out, and I think when Razorback fans, take a week to process this or whatever it might be, the season in its totality has so many positives, like you said. But when you talk about losing a game that way and losing a Sweet 16 game that way, it just painful doesn't even begin to cover it because again, it just that Arkansas was the vastly better basketball team for 35 and a half minutes of that game. And then just everything imploded. And, you said it, it's pretty much just a fitting way for this season to end when somebody threw the stat out. Thursday, it was the sixth time in the last 9 games the Hogs led by double digits at one point, and then at one point, then later on in the game, still trailed, right? So this is
Right.
nothing new. It's what this Arkansas team has done time and time again. And people always say, your warts always end up popping up bigger in March, right? And I think that's what we saw with this Arkansas team really throughout this 3 game run. You had a great win against Kansas, you had a great win against St. John's, and then you fall against Texas Tech. But it's the negatives that have plagued Arkansas all year that you saw pop up throughout the tournament. Even down to Evan and I were joking the first game. How do they almost lose the Kansas game? Kansas throws a zone at them. That takes you all the way back to the Baylor game at the beginning of the season.
Yeah.
The first time that Arkansas struggled and couldn't figure out a zone. That was from game one. It pops up against Kansas and almost costs you that one. And then 22 offensive rebounds last night against Texas Tech, 28 given up against St. John's, right? And then the self-inflicted mistakes that we talked about that you got away with against St. John's, you don't get away against Texas Tech. The issues that plague you all season long, they end up popping up in March, and they popped up in a way that just was unbelievably painful last night against the Red Raiders.
Yeah. And so it sounds almost like we're not giving enough credit for
Yeah.
the other team making plays, but look at the mistakes. I mean, the Billy Richmond turnover, that wasn't
Yeah.
a great defensive play.
No.
He looked like as he was making a pass that he had about 15 different ideas about where he wanted to go with that ball and couldn't decide on one. He says, "Well, I'm going to just lob it up and someone go get that." He threw
Hmm.
it right to the guy that going down, layup, and that was what fueled and kick-started that final run. Adu had a turnover in that mix. You had the miss front end of 1-and-1 on a night where he didn't seem like he could miss at the foul line.
Hmm.
Just and then the decisions to take those early shot clock threes when that's the last thing you needed to do. And the only one you hit was at the end of a shot clock when you had to take that shot,
Yeah.
and you made that one. This team is so puzzling and confusing in how they mismanage the end of games. It's different when your plan, your your game plan and the approach you're taking is the correct one, and you just fail in those endeavors and don't finish with a made shot and execute, and you spot and the other team does, and you say, okay, we did our best and we lost. But when you completely gift wrapped it by decisions you make, like you don't understand what the game situation is with that much clock left, that's what blows my mind this late in the year because they've done it so many other times. How do you not learn from that? How does the coaching staff, who I think ended up doing a great job with this team as individual players improved and the team improved as a result, but at the same time, how do you not get guys to do what's absolutely necessary? Again, they may not execute doing the right thing, but you'd rather lose that way than to say, "Hey, we're imploding right now. We're going to do the opposite of what we should be doing to help you out." I don't understand how from A to Z, top head coach to the ninth man in the rotation on the court, how you don't get that ironed out by now, by this juncture of the season. And again, we could dwell on a lot of the negatives because there were a lot when you lose that late and it's still raw. But again, I go back to the overall. I think this was a successful season given the roster attrition due to injuries. You played for so many games without your two leading scorers.
Hmm.
Ironically, I thought those players last night both had bad minutes. They just had bad minutes, and Arkansas limited those minutes as a result. So this was I think the ending was a microcosm of why you had 14 losses to begin with. But don't ever lose sight of the fact that this team could have completely tanked, and that's a credit to everybody from A to Z, the head coach down to the ninth guy in the rotation. I thought that Arkansas had a really nice run. They ended up winning 7 of their last 10
Hmm.
games on the season, including the loss last night.
I think that's a good way to put it. And again, I think a lot of that perspective for Hog fans will come with a little bit more time after how much this one stung. But there are so many positives to take away, especially. I mean, I know we've just said it time and time again, but when you think about a group that 0-5, the worst SEC start in program history, you got to go back to 85, 86 in the Southwest Conference to find the last time a team started 0-5 to bounce back from that the way this team did. It sounds odd, but I was talking to somebody about this, and I'm interested to get your perspective on it. It almost, there was a lot of talk about, has Cal lost his fastball, right? Can he still coach high level basketball, all of this stuff? And, some of the concerns were justified. Some were a little bit overblown. Hadn't made the second weekend since 2019, had issues at Kentucky, whatever it might be. And in a lot of ways, the way this season went and them figuring it out the way that they did, it made me far more confident in his ability as a coach and his ability to build a program and build a culture than it would have been had they just hovered in between, their preseason number 16 ranking and had they just hovered between 12 and 20 the whole season and just kind of, won a game here, lost a game here. It sounds backwards to say, and maybe I'm off on that, Kevin, but that being down as far as they were, 0-5, the worst SEC starting program
Yeah.
history, to figuring it out the way that they did without your two leading scorers, that made me far more confident in his ability that he has not lost that fastball and that there's a lot to look forward to for this program once the sting washes away a little bit. And maybe a lot more confident in that than, a season where they stuck in the 10 to 20 range, maybe the whole season would have. Am I off base on that? That's kind of how I've spun this in the past couple of days for myself.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a success for the things you just said. I mean, maybe there's a little bit of steam that's been lost on the fastball, but he still got the
Yeah.
fastball, and the changeup was great. His plate placement after you started 1-6, 0-5, and then 1-6 in league play, he was spotting the ball in the right places.
Mhm.
You were down Boogie Flan. I mean, this guy wasn't just a 15 plus point per game scorer. His assist to turnover ratio was brilliant. Led all freshmen in college basketball, and then nearly a 4-to-1 to
Mhm.
assist to turnover ratio. When they lost Thero with 4 games left in the regular season, that's your leading scorer, leading rebounder, leading leader in steals, leader in field goal percentage, leader in generating free throw attempts. I mean, you it's not like you just lost 2 of your top rotation guys. You
No.
lost your 2 best players and you figured out a way. So, the positives are all there. And that's why you hate to see the way the team bowed out. Losing a game like that, there's no shame in that. Losing the way you did, I think there is. And that's something you got to live with, and you got to realize you question how. This is the one thing that goes back to Calipari. What was missing in him? Because you mentioned 6 of the 9 games there where they had a big lead and
Yeah.
ended up trailing at some point, whether they won the game or lost it. What did they fail to do to fix that? Was it just in this team's DNA? I mean, I looked at it. I don't think, I go back to a guy like Jalen Williams, who's one of the
Mhm.
more cerebral players Arkansas's ever had, and his decision making, especially late in games. Jay Will, I don't think Arkansas quite had a player that understood the chess nuance of finishing games. I don't think there was one player that truly embodied that, and that might have been part of the problem on this team. It sounds like I'm swaying back to the negatives, but when you dissect it, you're trying to figure out why are we not in an Elite Eight right now, given all the problems. This is who Arkansas looked to be after beating Kansas and St. John's. And I'll say this, yeah, they may have get, those games may have turned dicey late because Arkansas gave up double digit leads, but I don't think they had as long of the implosion stretches. They corrected that, self corrected. And I thought maybe that would be the trend moving forward. And then we found out, of course, last night that it wasn't. So maybe you're looking at that and examining some of those dynamics and as part of your recruiting moving forward, especially when you look at what you're going to do in the portal now that we're in portal season. I think Darius Acup Jr. as a true freshman is going to come in cut from a cloth with a guy that, played on the highest level in high school, really makes good decisions and is clutch late. We'll see if that translates to this level, but it's a good start, a top 5 rated 5-star point guard in your early signing period.
A lot to look forward to with the recruiting class, and obviously what Arkansas will do in the portal, like you mentioned there. And I mean, I think it's been beat to death, and I don't think it fully excuses all the blown leads. But you talk about roster construction and how you look about building a team next year. I mean, I think it goes without saying, right? We talked about it so much, but with how limited the rotation was, when you talk about the amount of minutes guys had to play, there's just no way that that didn't contribute to falling away a little bit, in the back half of second halves. And obviously, you play a 45-minute game yesterday, so there are 5 more minutes added. But when you look at the fact that this team, so much was made of, hey, wow, 9 guys available. And obviously that was a bit tongue in cheek, given we knew Adu Thero would only be available for 12 to 15. But you've got 9 guys available. And if you run down the box score, yes, there were 5 extra minutes to play in the game, but, Brazil, Adu, Knox, Davis, Wagner all play 35 plus minutes, right? So, you talk about playing a full 40 minutes, that contributes to that as well. And that all goes into what do you want to see in year 2 for Cal in terms of roster construction and building more depth and learning from past experiences so something like this does not happen again.
Jacob, I think they need to go 11 deep
Yeah.
on a roster. I think they're going to have to make that adjustment. And if they don't, then we'll see what happens. But we saw this year what even though they turned a corner, that still played a big part when you look at 14 losses. And I think not having, if you go 11 deep beyond the way you constructed this roster, that'd be adding 2 more to it. One more backcourt piece, or possibly and one more front court, or possibly 2 more front court, with one of those being a 3-4 tweener, so you can have a little versatility there. Either way, I think you need to add more with guys that can actually come in and impact a positive outcome if you have foul trouble or players injured like we saw and not being able to play for not only, multiple games. I just think that's the best way to go right now, because you're probably still going to rely on an 8 to 9 rotation on it in most games. But with what we see in college basketball, it wasn't just at Arkansas. When you see that kind of attrition, to be able to turn to the 10th or 11th guy and know that they can help you give you 8-10 minutes, or maybe a whole game if a guy's out. I mean, those things I think can help Arkansas turn a corner the way that Calipari recruits. Now, that means more NIL money, but I'm told that there's a commitment to that. So let's see what happens. But I'm glad you brought up the point, because I think it's something that Arkansas needs to do, not just should do. I think they absolutely need to expand it to at least 11. Anything beyond that, is beyond that. But I think at least, not even 10. I think they need to go to 11. The immortal words of Christopher Guest in Spinal Tap. These go to 11. Well, this roster needs to go to 11 with playable players. That was Nigel Tufnell, by the way, on lead guitar. Spinal Tap.
It's a good reference right there. I like that. Yeah, I mean,
Is
Arkansas.
it really? It was awkward. It popped into my head, but I mean, it's a serious point, though. I really
Yeah.
think that that's going to help improve what Arkansas can do in this second season
Arkansas had 4 bench
under
players.
Calipari.
Yeah, Arkansas had 4 bench players yesterday. They combined to go 1 of 8 and scored 3 points in terms of Arkansas's 4 guys off of the bench. Need more in terms of depth. I forgot to ask you, not to bring up old wounds and go directly back to the game, but I think it is worth asking. Where did you fall in terms of the no timeout call? That's what Cal said after the game in terms of, hey, in that situation, I usually just let people play. He said, obviously, in hindsight, you wish you would have called a timeout. DJ doesn't get the best shot there. Where did you fall there? Arkansas had 1 timeout, and Cal ends up keeping it in his pocket. DJ takes that shot and misses. What were your thoughts when that play was going on, and how did you view all that after the fact?
Well, I'm either way, I'm okay with it. There's 2 schools of thought on how you do that,
Yeah.
and I've seen both successful. So I'm not going to really nitpick that. And DJ has done a good job all year of getting downhill and finding a way to knife his way to the basket. He can finish left or right,
Mm-hmm.
going directly to the rim, or sometimes fading a little bit. I don't think he was able to get close enough to it to get this kind of shot Arkansas wants. He's really not a mid-range pull-up shooter.
No.
He's got a little runner floater from 8 to 10 feet in the paint, but typically he's getting closer to that. And that's what you would have hoped for with 7 seconds to go. What would you have done if you'd have called a timeout? You're probably looking to get him downhill anyway, the same thing that he tried to do, and it just didn't work. So unless you could draw something up that gave him a little cleaner path, I guess you could make the point maybe they should have called a timeout. But I'm okay with it both ways. I'm glad he brought it up, though, because, I think what really I think the adjustment that should have been made was when Arkansas had that one possession when it was about 3 or so minutes left, and they were still up by 11, I think. And I think Davis took an early shot clock three. Arkansas managed to get an offensive rebound. They passed it over to DJ. They had a reset clock, and he jacks up an
Mm,
early reset shot clock three. I'm probably using a timeout as soon as possible to get this team to understand no more threes. We
yeah.
will not take a three unless it's a kick out at the end of the clock because we couldn't get a 2-point shot or draw a foul, which is what happened. That was the one make with
Hmm.
Carter Knox in there, just demanding that, you walk home if you take a three here at the end. We don't need them.
Yeah.
That's the timeout I would have used and made that adjustment because you didn't have just one early shot clock three on the same possession you had two. That's enough as a head coach for me. And I was actually thinking that at the time. I'm like, they got to get a dead ball and talk about this. Next dead ball, they got to and they just kept doing it. I was baffled by the Trevor Brazil three on an out of bounds play. It wasn't early clock, but you had 7 seconds left and he launched a three immediately after catching it as though there was zero point 0.4 seconds left on the shot clock. There was time to make one pass and drive and try to get to the foul line or get a closer shot. It's again the lack of chess playing by Arkansas's players when in game closing situations. And I know I'm beating that to death,
Mm,
but we're talking about decision making, what you coulda, shoulda, woulda, houlda. To me, these are just basketball one on one and how you close out a game and veteran guys. Calipari's been down this road. He's a long tenured coach that's had a lot of success. I think some of the, if I'm calling it, if I'm, if I'm pointing out a stretch where I think a timeout should have been, it was maybe late in that game in regulation.
I think that's a great point, and I don't know if it's the crazy nature of the loss, just how ridiculous that was. That's got me, feeling existential or something, Kevin. But is that not the just? It's the wild thing about this tournament, and it's the wild thing about sports is that Arkansas just they looked so much better than Texas Tech for, like we
Right.
said over and over again, for 35 and a half minutes, and just looked so comfortable. How you and I talked about last Sunday, how they expected to beat St. John's. They looked like they expected to beat Texas Tech. And that is what is so crazy about this tournament is that you can just see it in real time, the way that Arkansas just began to seize up. It was just, they started to look uncomfortable. They started to make mistakes. They started to do and make mental errors they hadn't made the whole entire game. That's not a different Texas Tech team across from you. It's the same one that you've played and really dominated for 35 and a half minutes. But all of a sudden, the crowd starts getting involved, and the moment becomes how it is in a March Madness game like that, and you just see an entirely different team for the last 3.5 minutes of the game. It's just a disappointing. Doesn't begin to cover it, and again, we can beat it like a dead horse over and over and over again. It just is. It stings because this is a team that should be playing in an Elite Eight game against a Florida team with a chance to get to San Antonio on Saturday, but that's the way it goes in March Madness. Anything else you want to hit before we go, Kevin?
No, I think we did it. I do want to leave with a positive.
Yeah.
Uh, Calipari is the best recruiter in college basketball. Arkansas's already got a top 5 rated high school signing class. Nate Amid's going to make his announcement on Tuesday. Another top 5 rated 5-star. Arkansas's in the final 5 there. I expect the portal recruiting to go well. We'll see about the retention. I think there are 5 guys when we look at that:
Mhm.
Big Z, DJ Wagner, Carter Knox, Billy Richmond III, and who did I leave out?
Brazil, good
Trevor
comeback.
Brazil.
Yep.
So who comes back out of that group? I really believe Boogie Fland and Adu Thero are moving on to the NBA
Mhm.
draft, trying to get work their way into that. And obviously Nelly Davis, who had 30 points, a season high. By the way, I don't know if we even mentioned that Carter Knox had his
20.
second 20-point game this season, really efficient. And Jonas Adu, are Nelly Davis and Jonas Adu are out of eligibility. So I think Calipari is going to do a really good job with this recruiting to assemble this next roster, and I do think he's going to expand it to 11. So we part with this. You had a successful season 1, despite how this game ended last night, and I think the recruiting's only going to give him another roster that has the potential to not only go beyond the first weekend, but maybe to a Final Four because that's just how he recruits. So there's a lot to look
Mhm.
forward to as bad as this one stings.
A lot to look forward to, but man, again, stings might be the statement of the century on that one. Texas Tech takes down Arkansas 85-83 in overtime. That's going to do it for this special, for all the wrong reasons, Hog Hoops Report. That's Kevin McPherson. I'm Jacob Morris. We will be back to talk to you on Sunday and break it down even further.